Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Ask me almost anything. My name is Glenn Gers, and I come to you live Tuesdays and Thursdays, if I can make it, at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time Zone. To do different things. Today is an Ask Me Almost Anything. Sometimes I'm breaking down scripts. Sometimes I'm talking about Hollywood history or other topics. But today, Ask Me Almost Anything. Last week, we were mostly occupied with breaking down the script, so I have a leftover question, which I am going to put up here. All right. Last week, I couldn't answer this question because I was occupied. So, Morbo asked, I wonder how closely filmmakers stick to the script. What were your experiences with this? So that's going to be our topic for today. For those of you who are looking for other kinds of screenwriting help and advice, the main thing that this channel does is on my main channel page, you can, this is a little screen capture of that, you can find the first 3 playlists. And these first 3 playlists are Screenwriting Essentials, Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft, and The Process, Being a Writer. This is where I have tried to put the most valuable things I know. The point of this channel is here in these 10-minute videos, each one on a topic that I think is useful. It's no grand overarching theory. It's just a bunch of things that I learned in my 25-year career writing for TV and movies. On my way out of the business, I decided, you know what? Nobody told me this stuff. I had to figure it out myself. And I really think that's foolish to not tell people on that things I learned. So I've tried to condense them down to very, very useful, brief tips, tricks, tools, skills. And you can put them together, use the ones you like. Don't use the ones that don't work for you. Everyone is different. Everyone has to figure out their own way of working and their own artistic goals and their own artistic path. There are no rules. You have to figure out what makes sense for you and what works for you. And that is what I'm trying to help you do, giving you some tools to do that. Let's say some hellos. Hello, magic internet movie called Adams. Hello, 99 Precinct and Heinz and Nathan. Yes, thank you. It is a fine sweater. It actually looks better on screen. It's a little faded in real life, but something saturated is happening here, which I like. So yeah, okay, cool. Let's get to the first topic because then I know you're all eager to ask me some questions. So let's do this. All right. Oh dear, I lost it. Add. Okay, here we go. I wonder how closely, let's talk about this. Morbo's question, how closely do filmmakers stick to the script? What were your experiences with this? All right, my experiences may not apply to everyone, but they are mine and I can talk about them. So let's talk about this. The first general answer about do filmmakers stick to the script? It depends. Some filmmakers are very much like, I'm locking the script before we go, and we're going to shoot exactly what we've got. Others want flexibility, improvisation. It is really a case-to-case, person-to-person, even project-to-project thing. You just never know. So there is no absolute rule, except there is one kind of rule, which is, it is very rare. It is almost, honestly, it just does not happen that scripts do not change in between the page and the screen. Just, there's no such thing as actually shooting everything in the script. Does not happen. The question is, how much of that is the natural translation and how much of it is other people getting their artist's chops in there, or their personal power struggles or their personal feelings, whatever it is, lots and lots of different forces are going to come into play between the script and the filmmaking. Hi, Capturing Your Heart. Hello to Germany. I am glad you came across too. Please welcome. Please do feel free to ask questions. So my personal experiences about what happened to my scripts on the way to the screen. the range from A to Z, from alpha to omega. When I worked on sitcoms, honestly, I have credit on some episodes that there is really barely a word left that I originally wrote. A script I did called Brother's Keeper, which was made into a TV movie on the USA Network, with actually some classy filmmakers, drastically rewritten without my knowing about it. I'll tell you that story. On the other hand, Off Season, the script that I did for Showtime, and I swear it was amazing. They really basically shot the script word for word, and yet many, many changes even then. Even stuff I directed myself, produced, financed, and directed, so I had total control. Still, things change. Hello, Natasha. And hello, Michael. After listening to your breakdown of your script, I realized how rigid I was as a writer. Ah, good. If I have taught you that, yay, I'm glad. Yeah, screenwriting requires being open to changes. And that's what we're talking about here, so that's cool. Here's the thing. I had a personal problem with my stuff being changed, which was my problem. It was truly as a mixture of a lot of things, but I really struggled with this, with the partly the relentless delusional belief that my work was the center of the project. Oh, hi, Gig McFish. I did not know you were from Germany. Cool. So my experiences varied over time because basically over the course of 20, 30 years, I slowly learned that in fact my job was just part of the process. I personally I'm very controlling. I like to have things the way I like to have them. But also, when I was learning about this stuff, and that's why I'm trying to do this now, when I was learning about it, there was very little information about the reality of how this job goes, how this work is done, and what the experience is of getting a script written and into production. There was very little, and furthermore, there was just bullshit from the business, and especially the press coverage of the business. It is really useful to remember the media does not understand or correctly represent the artistic process. Does not. For many reasons cannot, but mainly, honestly, it's just not their concern. It's not their interest. Their interest, when somebody's writing an article for a magazine or a website or a newspaper or doing a clip for a show or even a biography, documentary, they are doing their thing with your work, with your experience. And it is very important, for instance, for press coverage to be essentially favorable. Most press coverage is a press release. So if you read an interview with a filmmaker about their recent project, if you read a little article about where they talk about some aspect of the writer or director or actor's process in making something, that is a publicity piece. It is not a hard-hitting investigative report that is set up by the promotions department of the releasing entity and the arts department of the media outlet, and they negotiate that they're going to go, they're doing stuff for The Fabelmans right now, Spielberg's movie. And I just saw in the New York Times that there's an article about Judd Hirsch, one of the actors. That's not like they suddenly said, gee, let's talk about Judd Hirsch, or that Judd Hirsch suddenly said, I have something to say. It's that the press department said, what would the New York Times audience most like to hear about? Oh, Judd Hirsch, Broadway actor. Let's put him on there. So that's how that happens. Okay. Oh yeah, I'm going to talk about William Goldman. Thank you. That is cool. Thank you. Hi, Blaine. And yeah, Michael, when you get a chance, tell us rigid in what way. That would be interesting. But the main thing is you have to understand, when they do little interviews and you see this person there, they have a weird background behind them and they do 50 interviews at one day. It's called a junket. And usually what happens is the actors or the writers, the directors sit in one room and the press comes in and out. They get there and they get their 10 minutes and they put their own logo behind it later in post. And they get their 10 minutes and then they leave, and then the actor just sits there and waits for the next person to come through. Anyway, I have done just a couple of those, not a lot. And very often I was in with other people because I was a writer, and writers are not important. But the thing I will tell you is I lied. I always lied. Everyone lies in those things. You don't say any negative stuff. You don't say anything about any frustrations. You don't say anything about anything that you didn't like about the process, because you want to be known as a person who is not going to tank the interview and make the thing look bad. That's just bad career move to do that. You'd have to be really, really trying to accomplish something personal to ever speak ill of the project in any press release. So therefore, all of that information is a lie. It's publicity. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, especially in the time that I was growing up, the 1960s and 70s, but also the 80s and 90s, that whole 40-year period was the auteur period of understanding of how things got made, which means director. The idea is that the director of a movie is the author, French word for author. And therefore, there's a vast confusion over the idea that a script could be written by an individual writer, and then the director could be assigned to it. Those things were not, it was always presented as essentially a filmmaker's point of view, and the script was part of that. But that's not the writer's experience. The writer's experience is they make something up and then other people mess with it, sometimes making it better, often making it better. That's the other difficult thing about this rigidity and artistic integrity. Very, very often, you're wrong. So that's hard. Hi, Ray. Yes, I was. Well, not school exams, but writing, yes. Let me get to that in a second. Anyway, so the main thing is, let's talk about my experience. Something I wrote, a movie called Fracture, opens, the main character, the villain, Anthony Hopkins' character, we start on him. And we needed to find some way to define what he's like. Originally, he was working on this stress test because he does airplane engineering, helicopter engineering, actually, which was going to come in later when there was a helicopter scene, which they cut. So none of this mattered. But what matters is we were trying to define the character. And I thought about this thing that I had seen in a subway station in New York City, the Port Authority subway station, the Port Authority bus station in there was both. There was an artist who did very elaborate devices where a ball would roll down tracks and jump on things and go all over the place. They were very ornate. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if this character made those as a hobby? He's an engineer. So I wanted to show that he's a very tricky Rube Goldberg device making trap maker, because that's what he was. And that was a way to show it. And I described it in detail because it was very important, because later on in the end of the script, this device was going to physically become the place where evidence was hidden. And so it had to be very mechanically dense, lots of layers so that you couldn't really see inside it. Okay, so I described that. Everyone loved it. It became the opening credit sequence of the movie. However, when they had to have that thing built, which, remember, somebody has to actually physically do all the things you write and describe in the script. And I thought I was being pretty practical and I could tell them what it looked like. They then did research on these machines because people make them. And they found a gorgeous artist in Europe who made these elegant, beautiful versions of this thing with these balls that rolled on these tracks. It did not look anything like the thing I described, nor did it serve the purpose, the secondary purpose that I had for this, which was that it would become intricate and difficult to get in and out of for the piece of hidden evidence, the gun. So therefore, they said, oh my God, that's so cool. Let's make one of those like that. And then they made it. And the end of the film had to be reshot partly because it didn't make any sense, because the gun was supposed to be hidden in this device, and it was just a beautiful, graceful thing where you could see and reach into anything there. So the answer is, did they change it? Yes. Did they have could I have stopped it? No. I was working on the production with them, and I'm sure at some point said, that's going to be a problem for that. And they were like, we need this. It's very beautiful. It's going to serve our purposes in many artistic ways. And so we ended up having to change the end of the script. Things change. And that was with my collaboration, with me involved. I still could not get across to them that this was going to be a plot problem. Okay. Hi, Donna. Hello, Eva. Yes, I'm actually going to do a lengthy description of Fracture, of the production, as a separate full episode. So I'm just talking about the credits here to talk about script changes. But yes, good question. Fracture is on the list of behind the scripts. Hi, Red Shadow. And you pitch an old script. Oh, you mean like can I do it? And I was like, sure, but what's the point? You mean, can one do that? Yes, I will talk about that in a second. Hi, Camilo. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this. When people in Hollywood talk about how important the script is, they mean it. But they mean it's the start of a process, and it is going to be changed, just like the locations are going to be found. There's a physical and financial reality to making productions, which will require that the script not be followed exactly. And that's just the physical and financial level. Back in old Hollywood, there was a brief period when everything was shot in a factory studio and everything was more or less controlled. There were still limits, but if Hitchcock had a storyboard and he said, I want this chair here and this doorway here, and outside the doorway I want to see this, they built that. And big, expensive pictures still do that. But most things, they're like, you know what? We've got this location, but the door's on the other side of the room. Or we've got this location and it doesn't have a door. Whatever it is, you're going to have to rethink the scene to fit that reality. So that is the answer. But even if they shoot it word for word, even if they didn't change a single thing, it changes. Even when you're directing your own work, you find that you, as a director, it is your requirement to make it work visually and chronologically and for the performance and for a lot of other things. And so therefore, you can't just stick to the script. Famously, Paddy Chayefsky, who was one of the great screenwriters of the 1970s, and he by the time he got super powerful, he had in his contract that no one was allowed to change a word of the script without his permission. Not a word. And this was a problem because his last director was a guy named Ken Russell, who was this wild guy, British director. And he also essentially two different people had final cut, because Ken Russell had final cut over everything except the script. Paddy Chayefsky had final cut over the script. So this movie called Altered States, which is a very interesting movie. It's not really a successful movie. It's got a lot of flaws and a lot of weirdness, but it's also got some interesting stuff in it. But what's really interesting is you can see what happens when somebody can't change the script. Because what Ken Russell did was, since he couldn't change the script, he just had the actors say these long speeches very, very fast and on top of each other. He would have people talking over each other so as to basically just put the script in the background and get a sense of the scene. But the script itself was murdered. So I would say that one of the most important things to remember is it is not possible for a script to be shot as is. There's always a flow. One of the most important things is to recognize every actor is different. They are required to use their natural self as the instrument of the character. And therefore, there's going to be some translation between what you imagined and what they do with it. And what you want to do is write for that. You want to write things that they can translate many ways and it still works the way you need it to. That's good screenwriting. The good dramatic writing comes when you write something that even if they change a word or two most of the time, or even if they say it a different way, it powers the action no matter what, and it contains the feeling no matter what. There's a lot of different ways that you can say any line. So one of the most difficult things is when writers get too precious with their work and they have power, it very often disrupts everybody else's job. Sometimes it's cool. It's okay. Every production is a power play, is a series of struggles of different people trying to do their thing in a collaboration. That can be incredibly productive or incredibly destructive. Like everything else, it depends. It depends on all these different circumstances. But the most important thing I would say to you as writers who are trying to learn this is remember that a script is just part of the process. You're delivering to other people who are going to do their work with your script. And therefore your job is to create scripts that can do that. And it's a learnable skill. It is an understanding of what scripts really are. And the only way that I know to get that understanding is production. Do it. Have it done. No matter what form of production. If it's a bunch of people in the backyard shooting it, you still will get a good sense of this if you do it over and over. Only through experience can you understand what a script really is. It's screenwriting is filmmaking without the movie magic. It's like take everything that's magical about movies and TV shows, all the music and cinematography and production design and acting and pacing, everything about it. You don't get to use any of that. That's what you have to do is make a movie, make this thing happen on the page without using any of that stuff, only using character and story action and the words that people say and the things they do. Somehow or other, that has to convey this essential magic that all those other people are going to layer, the music and the camera and everything else comes over the characters and the story, and the ways that people do things. That's what a script is. That is what the job of a screenwriter is. And the only way you can learn that is by writing a lot of scripts and doing a lot of scripts. If you can't get them done by find a little filmmaking group, a college group, do your own stuff, write for the stage, somehow or other, get into some form of production. I did do a video about this. I'm trying to see if I have the. I don't. It was called "Get Your Script on the Stage on the Screen." Anyway, I'll put a link down in the bottom. Okay, so that is that topic. Let's see what else we've got here. All right. Hello, Morbo. That was your question I was answering. Your question was, if you just joined us and you missed it, the past 20 minutes I've been answering your question about, here, there it is. You asked this last week. So hi, Morbo. Nice to see you. Okay. Unlike, yes, this is absolutely true. Michael is pointing out, Padachevsky, I believe, changed. Did he change his? Did he take his name off that script? He changed his name. Most writers will just leave their name on and just say, yeah. Most screenwriters are used to seeing things, and they say, I don't even recognize what's on that screen. And I've had that experience. Hi, Robert Javier. Constitutive outlining or to figure out the story before, but it never comes through together. Okay. Let's help. It would be nice to see the same script done by two different filmmakers. It would, and there is actually an interesting version of that. It's not. I believe that there's a season of Project Greenlight, which I believe is on HBO. I'm not sure. But there was a season of Project Greenlight where they took the same premise. It wasn't the same script, but they took they gave the same premise and the same budget, the same everything and they shot them side by side at the same time in Pittsburgh to two different independent filmmakers. It's actually a very interesting thing. Okay, let's go back and answer some questions. First, I'm going to go way back because... I just wanted to briefly talk about William Goldman. Yeah, William Goldman was one of the first people to write a how to write scripts book. It was called Adventures in the Screen Trade, which was a mixture of advice about screenwriting and his experiences in the screen in writing some of the best movies of the 60s and 70s. And what was really interesting for me about myself was at the time I read it, it was very inspiring and exciting. And I read it 20, 30 years later, I read it again. And I realized that it was an agonized scream of pain. But when I first read it, I'm just so focused on finding the way to get things done, finding the way to make things work, I'm going to do this, that I didn't recognize how much of Adventures of the Screen Trade is saying how agonizingly difficult it is to be a screenwriter. I thought that was a fascinating thing. Everything that we do, we twist through our perceptions and our abilities. And that's something that you have to be aware of. You're not going to change it, but it could be helpful to be aware. Okay, questions. Were you always excited to write stories growing up? Yes. Starting when I was a kid, there was a point at which, I think I've talked about this a little before, I started, what I liked was seeing and reading stories. I didn't particularly want to write them. I just wanted to glom as many of them I could inside. I wanted to read as many books or watch as many TV shows or movies as I could. At some point, something triggered in me that there was actually a pleasure to be gained by making them instead of just consuming them. Not everyone has that tipping point where they want to actually make them. But I remember when I did, it was that thing that musicians sometimes talk about, where they talk about like the rock musician, the first time they heard Elvis or something, it's like, oh my God, this is this thing I must do. And I will just spend the rest of my days doing this thing, trying to do this thing. That is how it felt for me. My memory of it is that it was actually James Bond. Reading an article by the author of the James Bond books, Ian Fleming. He'd written an article about how he wrote the James Bond books. And I was like, I have to do this. Anyway, yes, I always loved writing. I loved theater. I loved movies. I loved painting. I had to give up some of those things because you can only do so many things. If today's technology existed, I guarantee you I would be working on graphic arts full time. I would probably be trying to write music. The more, like when I go into Home Depot, all I think is, I want to build stuff. So yeah, that is me. School exams is a tricky thing because every time, like if I was going to write a short story for school, if they let me write whatever I want, great. And those times were heaven for me. But most of the time, just like with writing jobs, if there's a requirement to please others, it really gets in my way. Anyway, Michael, talking about what makes his writing rigid and what he wants to try and change, sticking to the rules of screenwriting. Yes, that's the rules of screenwriting is a very nebulous thing. You will remember, I hope, that what I have said is there are many, many, many different rules, many of which oppose each other. There are no actual rules. Okay, there are other than beginning, middle, and end. I don't believe that and even that may not, but I think it does. There are actually no rules. There are rules of various phases of the business, but even those are operating only at a certain time with certain companies. People have been trying to codify that into some universal true rules. That is nonsense. The rule that a certain thing has to happen at a certain part of the story, or that the character has to change, or that we have to like the character, or all of those things. Those aren't rules. Those are suggestions. Those are formulae that people say, when this other films did this, it was successful commercially in this marketplace. That's all they're saying. That doesn't, I guarantee there's a lot of people who think that those most successful films are shallow or boring. There are no actual absolute rules of screenwriting. There are some formatting issues that are absolute, but only actually in the current Hollywood business. Different film industries may have different formatting. And certainly when film scripts started, it's not like there's an actual natural order of film scripting. There's lots of different ways you could do it. The business requires it. Those are the only rules. Okay, so let us get to Richard's question. Constant state of outlining and pre-writing to figure out the story before I sit down and write a draft. I've done a bunch of things to help with this. So I'm going to suggest, first of all, a couple of my own videos. There will be links in the description after this episode is over. I will put them down there. So if you're watching this later, that's where they are. If you're watching this live, wait about 10 minutes after the video, I'll put them on. Fear of writing. I talk a lot about that because to a certain extent, that is, Robert, what is going on there. That part of writing is frightening to you. It feels wrong. You may have a logical reason why it is bad, but that's not actually true. That's actually fear that it will be bad or prejudging. First of all, you can't judge a thing that doesn't exist yet. So if you're saying, oh, that's going to be bad, you're just wrong. You don't know if it's going to be bad. And whatever it's going to be, you can make it better if you do it. So a lot of what you're talking about is fear of writing. I tell a story about my own experience of that because I've had years and years of what you are talking about, Robert. Among the things that I found that helped me with that, partly, there's one called Create a Ritual. I find that really helpful. And then Small Steps. There's a video I did called Small Steps, which I would suggest. The main thing that I'm going to say in all of those, but I'll also say it here, is if there is a part of the process that you're having trouble with, the first thing you want to do is try to break it down into teeny micro amounts. Like if all you can do is one sentence, okay, do one sentence a day. If it comes down to if you have your outline and your pre-writing and all those things, if you have an outline, you are ready to write. You may change it. Things change. That's okay. But you have to start with that rough draft, that first sketchy line on the page. You can erase it, you can draw over it, but you need to get something down. So the first thing I would say, Robert, is get something down on paper every work session, every day, if at all possible, even if it's just 10 minutes a day, to take some quiet time when you can, even if it's you're riding the subway and you get out your notebook or your phone, try to get just one sentence. It doesn't even have to be the first sentence, and it doesn't have to be good. Good is irrelevant in art, okay? What's important is done. But you can always make it better, because once it's not good, you can say, well, what is not good about it? And then you can do whatever it is that would repair that not goodness. This is very artificial feeling, but eventually it becomes absolutely restorative. In other words, I have felt the feeling of, I don't believe what I am writing. I don't believe it is good. But I have learned that even if I don't believe it, if I follow the process, if I follow the mechanics of it, it will actually become good. And now I never feel like it's not going to be good. Even if I don't like a particular thing, I don't have that feeling of, I can't do this. Because I know, just from the experience of having done it, which is the only way you can really know something, that it will work out. The only way to find that out is to do it. So if you say it never comes together enough, then do it untogether. If you have an outline, if you don't, and even if you don't have an outline, just start getting pieces, little pieces at a time, and then give yourself a reward, give yourself a break, and come back to it the next session fresh and do a little piece, and don't fix the old one. Get a pile done. It may help you to watch me do that in the Screenwriting Step-by-Step project. Do I have a thing about that? No, I don't. Okay. I did on another playlist, you'll find 266 episodes of watching me do this thing. I knew that this is a question. A lot of people are like, what do you do? So you can watch me go get my outline, and at a certain point go like, well, I have a feeling that I can make that scene work. It's partly I've got experience, but partly it's like, okay, I know what the scene is about. I know what has to happen. And if all that happens in this scene is that this guy leaves that thing in the safe deposit box, and if all I write is the guy leaves the thing in the safe deposit box, that's actually good screenwriting. That's good enough. That's a good start. So that is my answer to Robert Gavir about how do I get past the outlining and pre-writing and into the script. Watch my Screenwriting Step-by-Step. If just a little piece of it, you don't have to watch 200 hours of it. Just drop in a little. The last episode, it says the end. I mark down where I took certain turns, like when I started the rough draft and when I started the rewrite. So you could say, oh, episode 175 is when he starts doing that first draft. Watch 20 minutes of that. See how you feel about it. See if that helps. All good, Margot. Okay. Exorcist had 2 films and 2 directors. Now that's Exorcist 4. Exorcist 1 had 1 film, 1 director who actually did probably the best work of his life. There are 2 versions of Exorcist 4, 3 or 4. No, 4. One by Paul Schrader and one by somebody else, I believe. That is a word. If you want to see the same film made by 2 different people, that's a good example. All right. Also remakes. Honestly, remakes do that. Is it okay to put in a script something like we see the protagonist drinking coffee through the window? I feel like I'm stepping. It depends. Yes, it is okay. You have to think about why. Like, is it important that we're seeing it through the window? If it is, yes, you can. I absolutely do that all the time. Ideally, you would just say, inside the window, Jerry is drinking coffee, or behind the glass, Jerry is drinking. Something that takes away the we see would be good. However, there are times when you do say, like, we see a shadow fall across his face, but you could just as easily say a shadow falls across his face. The answer is, why do you think it's important that we see the protagonist drinking through a window? Because if you're just saying it's a mood, then describe the mood. Like to say protagonist, I hate the word protagonist, the main character, or Jerry, Jerry sits in a diner looking out at the snow and drinking coffee. Now, whether or not we'll see that through the window doesn't matter. That's up to the director. Okay. But yes, if it's important that we see him through the window because we are looking from the outside because our other character is outside, sure. But then you could just as easily say, Sarah sees Jerry through the window. And then you don't have to say, we see. That's my feeling on the, is it okay? Yes, sometimes it's okay, but most of the time, try and think about why you're doing it. Because if you're just doing it because you have a picture in your mind of what it should be like, see if you can put that picture into the story, into the event, so that it's just natural and you don't have to say, we see. If you can say, Jerry sits at the window drinking coffee and looking out at the snow, let the director find that shot. What you're trying to say is Jerry is at the window. But that's one script. Something Wild starts as a comedy and ends as a very dark thriller. By the way, that was an enormous flop. I mean, it was an art success, but at the time, I was writing screenplays at the time in New York when that came out, and everyone said, don't do that. Every producer in the world was like, Demi did this thing, and it's like starts as one thing and it ends in another, and nobody knows what to do with it. And it's a really interesting movie, but that's considered a red flag. Okay. Yes, that's right. Thank you. That's a good point for Robert. If you're still here, Robert, one of the things is you're going to feel like the reason that you're not writing is something very rational. And what I'm going to ask you is, why do you think that? Like, what is it about your writing that you feel is not ready? Readiness is just a matter of doing, because the truth is, you're not finishing it, you're just starting it. So you're always ready to start. If you don't have an outline and you want to start writing anyway, go ahead. I personally feel uncomfortable doing that, but under certain circumstances, it's not a terrible idea. The main thing to do is, if you find yourself never getting to a certain stage of the process, that's not because of the specific work. If it happens on more than one script, then it's not a problem of the script, it's a problem of your feeling about doing that thing. And one of the most important things about feelings about doing a thing is, do the thing so much that you don't feel bad about it. If you are afraid to play the guitar, and every time you try and practice, you go, oh, I'm not ready to practice, you'll never get good at playing. So the answer is, do it with the understanding that at least for some of the work, it's going to be bad. That's part of it. That's fine. That's absolute. We're all afraid of long-term commitment, are we? Many people are. Other people like it. It's like, oh, now I know what I'm doing for the next 2 years. The thing we're afraid of is long-term commitment that goes bad. That's what you don't want. If you're saying like, okay, this is going to take you 2 years, and at the end of it, you're going to get the Nobel Prize, you're probably going to do it. The problem is we're afraid it will fail. That is the thing. Hi, yeah, you're welcome, Ray. Absolutely. I'm curious, are your thoughts on lyric writing? This knowledge and lyrics, is a song just a character? That is a tricky question, and a good one, Kyle. I'm actually working on. I do believe that screenwriters and dramatic writers and all writers can learn from lyrics. However, it also goes the other way. But here's the thing: there's many different forms of songs. Some forms of songs are in the voice of the song. In other words, there is no character to a lot of songs, and therefore, then it wouldn't really be the same, because it's essentially its own poetic language and meaning. And you could, like, often there's cases of people writing a song that is essentially the voice of the songwriter speaking directly to the audience. There's no character there, although the voice of the songwriter is a character. But sometimes it's sort of neutral. It's omniscient to say, this is happening. Eleanor Rigby, the Beatles song. I mean, technically, that's a narration of a series of vignettes, a series of still moments or little bits of action that are being observed by a neutral, observing voice who is describing what they are seeing or what is happening. Still good storytelling, beautiful storytelling, actually. But the question is, if you sometimes a lyric is a speech. There's a lot of good songs which are in the voice of a character, and in that case, they can often be essentially a monologue. In other words, this is a little story that I am telling you, and it's going to have a beginning, middle, and end, and I'm going to reveal things as they go on. There's a Bruce Springsteen song called "Racing in the Street," in which this guy talks about his car and then how he met his girlfriend in this car, who apparently becomes his wife or live-in lover, and at a certain point, their life goes badly. And so now he goes out and drives his car, and she stays home. And the description of that in several verses is a story he is telling us, but the process of the layers by which he describes things, each one has a meaning, is a beautiful example of that. There's so many great lyrics that do that. You got Lou Reed has a song called Street Hassle, which is an amazing, because it's multi-voiced. It's like a 8-9 minute song, and there's different voices, and it's telling a story by switching voices. So there's a girl who goes to a party with this guy, and she overdoses, and then there's the voice of the guy who's like lofted is or place it is, saying like, you got to get that body out of here. And then there's like this actually Bruce Springsteen does a little cameo voiceover, little section of the song, which is sort of a neutral voice of the narrator, or not the narrator, but a philosophical view of what's happening. And then the end is the voice of the girl, the dead girl. It's a very Street Hassle, really powerful set of voices in lyrics. Can you learn from that as a screenwriter? Yes. Can the lyric writer learn from screenwriting? I think so. But anyway, Gig McFish points out, it's better done than better. Yes, that is exactly right. It is better to get it done than to make it better and not done. Okay. So let's keep looking at these questions. How can someone prepare themselves to be able to be capable and competitive during the stage of script modification by a production house? What kind of work does... that's a great question. The answer is work towards it slowly, through experience. The only way that you can prepare... The question is, how can you prepare yourself to be capable and competitive? And by the way, I personally don't like competitive. I understand that there is a competition factor in work situations. However, to me, art is the opposite of competitive. But I understand what you're saying. You're saying able to do the jobs that they want you. During the stage of script modification, when people are asking the rewrites, the answer is get experience and recognize that it is unfortunately the sort of thing that you have to build up to. And so the best way that you can become competent and capable is doing it badly or for cheap production, places where the stakes are low. What you don't want to do is go into the highest level of competition inexperienced. If you can put on plays, like I said, if you can find some crappy, famously, a lot of filmmakers in the studio system, they all just worked in the studio, worked their way up. Once the studio system fell apart, a lot of filmmakers learned to be capable and competitive by working in crappy movies. Okay. Genre films, terrible grade Z, low budget stuff. Make your own little art films. Find a group that wants to make their own little art films or their own little genre horror films, whatever it is. The way that you become capable and competitive is through experience. The more that you can learn by understanding other people's experiences, better. There's a Backstory online magazine and also a podcast, Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith, which are excellent. They do a lot of interviews, and he says his interest is the creative process. So they do interviews with TV people, film people, and talk about how they did it. The more of those that you can get, genuine, like I said, there's obviously always a promotional aspect to it, but the reason I like Backstory and Jeff Goldsmith is because his interest is not in promotion. It is in education. It is in teaching, showing the process. And that makes it really, really different. The people who go on that, they go on that during their promotional tour, but he spends an hour talking to them about how to. Likewise, the On Story, Austin Film Festival screenwriting conferences, they have podcasts, they have a magazine, I believe. They have some books. There's a lot of material out there which talks about what it's like for people, but you can read for the rest and listen to podcasts and know every behind-the-scenes story. You still will not be competent and competitive until you have done it yourself a bunch of times. That is the secret to art. That is the secret to any form of creative work, or frankly, I believe any form of anything. I often give the example, you know how to walk. Most of you out there are going to say, I believe, know how to walk. When you learned to walk, it was really, really hard for you. And you fell down a lot of times. And it took months of daily practice to get good at walking. And now, when you walk, you don't think about, how am I getting this foot in front of that foot without falling over? Which is, honestly, that's a tough game. But once you get used to it, then you're like, I'm going to walk to that store because I want to buy a thing at the store. You don't even think about the walking part. That is what you want to get to with writing. The only way you get to that is by doing it and getting practical experience of production of any kind. If you don't want to DIY, see if you can find somebody who's looking for. There are going to be people who do other jobs that don't know how to write, that want scripts. Give it to them for free. Give it to them for $10 and say, take it, make it, we'll split whatever comes. The problem is that people start to try and strategize. Okay, my first script, I need to make sure that not only do I get it made, but I get it made and I make a big deal and I get a better deal and I get a big agent and I get set for life. Because that's how Hollywood people think. They are in the business of trading and manipulating business entities. They are not in the business of making shit. They don't do that. And they don't understand that the goal is to make as much stuff as you possibly can make. And if that means that you don't make a bunch of money from it, fine. That's okay. Most people don't make money from their art. But the main thing is you can't get good at your art until you've done it repeatedly and exposed it to an audience and seen what happens. That is the absolute center of creative work. My son wants to watch some recent streams. That is possible. You know what? Do you mean recent streams? Like what kind? Tell me what kind, because it's possible. Some new stuff. You should watch some new stuff. Okay. Another question. Is it okay to write somewhat expressively rather than descriptively? Absolutely. Yes. In fact, if you go to my last few live streams are called Behind the Script, for a script I wrote called Ways to Be Wicked. In that, I repeatedly show where I specifically wrote essentially just to engage the reader personally with my voice. So yeah, I would say look at those Behind the Script, Ways to Be Wicked. There's 3 long live streams about that. Maybe it is. Yes. Yes, absolutely. I don't know you, but I can tell you the odds are 99 to 1 that it is a form of fear. If something is happening repeatedly to you in your writing process on different projects, then that can't be always the same problem. It can't be. It can only be your feelings being the problem, because each of those, you can't have the same problem every time. At least one of those times you're going to say, or if you are afraid of something specific, work on a project that specifically doesn't do that. And then you'll see what happens. But what I think will happen is exactly what happened to me. This is the reason I can say this with assurance. If you find yourself repeatedly not being able to do a step of the process, it is because you are afraid and unfamiliar with that step of the process. And that anything that you think it is, it's not. It's that. It's the fear. It is not whatever you think. It's fear and unfamiliarity. And that's just logic, if you think about it. I have a scene where all that happens is a car pulls up to a building, followed by a scene where people in the car. Is it necessary to leave establishing shots in the script? Well, I'm not sure what you mean, because, I mean, essentially, this is interesting. If you have a scene where all that happens is the car pulls up to the building, and then followed by a scene of people in the car. In other words, that there's like a conversation in the car, or that people get into the car. Try and explain that, because essentially what you would say is, if what you're trying to describe is a thing that happens, which is a car pulls up to a building and people get into the car, then do you need to describe the exterior? Yeah, you probably do need to say outside apartment building. The black convertible pulls up. Sue and Billy walk out of the building and get into the car. Then the next scene is in the car. Is it necessary to have that exterior shot? No. It could easily be that you're just going from wherever else you are to in the car. People will understand that somehow or other they got in the car. You don't need to show every step of the process. If the pickup is important, you should show it. But if all you want to do is say, these people got in a car, and then the scene is about being in the car, just cut to the inside of the car. Saw the recent Matrix. Couldn't the producer say or see it's not going to make money? First of all, I'm not sure that it didn't make money because it was released direct to the streaming service. So the purpose of it was to sell the streaming service, not the movie. But that's a tricky question. The answer is no. If people honestly thought that something wasn't going to make money, they probably would not get the money to make it. Although sometimes you do. Sometimes you say, it's not going to make money, but it's worth it because of this other thing than money. Maybe it's giving a good message. Maybe this happens. Someone will do something that won't make money because they want the next project by that person. And so they're willing to have that person. Doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened where somebody has said, I will make this art film for you if you will then make Batman for us, that kind of thing. Isabel, how important is visual description of the setting in novel writing? Can you get away with really minimal? Yeah. First of all, do remember I am not a experienced novelist, but I have written a novel and I read a lot of them. And the answer is, how important is it? That's entirely, every novel has its own style and voice. And therefore, it's not important at all if you don't want it to be important. There's a writer named Sally Rooney, Irish writer who famously is very minimal. There's actually a lot of minimalist writers who do not do a lot of they describe the feelings, they describe the dialogue, they describe the characters and what's going on, but they don't spend a lot of time setting the scene. There's no reason to set the scene if you don't want to. That's entirely, especially in fiction, your choice of what you talk about is your choice. The answer would be, if the audience is frustrated because they don't know what's going on, and even then, you might choose to have that happen. There's a thriller by Don Winslow called Savages, which is almost all dialogue. And it works. It's knockout. But it's very, very minimal. The answer is simply, you are allowed to do what you want if you do it authentically as your way of telling the story. Certainly in a novel. On the topic of the stream, have you ever feared that filmmakers will make a bet? Yeah. Yes, of course. However, you have to understand the situation of screenwriters is always, I am so desperate to get something made. There's an enormous financial and career difference between things that get made and things that don't. That could be the definition of success in many ways for most writers. When you're not getting paid to write, it seems like getting paid is in fact the definition of success. In Hollywood, it's not. A fair number of people get paid for things that don't get made, or get made in a different version than the one you wrote. So therefore, actually getting a production of your work, even if it's terrible, is a vital accomplishment. And so therefore, every screenwriter I've ever heard of is like, they're going to screw it up, but at least I will get the credit and the money and the respect of people, because everyone knows that the screenwriter has no power. So very often they will say, that was bad, but it wasn't the script. Sometimes they'll say it was the script, and sometimes it is the script. But the answer is, have you ever feared it? Yeah, we always fear it. The best thing you can do is not think about that. You have absolutely no control over it. And what's more, you have no control, even if you're involved, even if you're there every day, nobody knows how this process happens. It always happens differently. Every single time is this bizarre combination of different entities and different just things happening in the culture, so that you can make something that's good, and then by the time it comes out, it's not good. There's nothing you can do about that. The only thing you can say is, if you write a good script, it will be detectable to those who understand what scripts are in the business, even through a bad production. Hi, Chaz. Sorry. Yes. Yeah, I would say in the Middle East, everything is I am only knowledgeable about late 20th century, early 21st century Hollywood, America. That is all I can vouch for as far as understanding how the business works. How the art works, I would say, is different. I think that that's fairly translatable. I think that admittedly, there are different cultural views on what a story should do or how a character should work, and therefore different traditions. But there's also different traditions even within the Western tradition. But I do not in any way ever, in fact, you'll know the one thing I say is there is no universal truth to the art or the business. So take from it what you can, discard the rest, not a problem. My master's degree didn't help me a lot. I got a random, unrelated. What good things could I be doing that could get me on a good path screenwriting-wise? I don't want to feel like I'm wasting time. Also, England, so it might be hard to give advice. Okay, so the basic answer is, aside from the master's degree thing, because that's one of the things, when it comes to art, a degree is kind of irrelevant. You can be a good artist without any education whatsoever, and a great deal of education can not guarantee that you're any good. That is unfortunately the thing about art. That does not mean that an arts education is bad. It just means it doesn't guarantee anything for you. And that you can do it without. But it's very helpful to learn. So, Ches, some of your degree, I'm sure, is useful. All I would say is the only thing, and I have said this before in many different contexts, the only thing that an artist can do, as far as I know, is this. You have to work very, very hard, continuously over time, over many works, over many projects. You have to just keep doing the work, completing it, and showing it to people as best you can. If that is your own website and you put things up there and now and then people come to it, cool. Festivals, brilliant. Do that. The more work you can do, the more, if all you're doing is screenwriting, you should be writing a lot of scripts. But whatever you're doing, you have to keep doing it and work on getting better. Don't work on what other people want. Say, what do you think would make your next script better than your last one? Sometimes it's just different. Like I'll work on a comedy and I'll say, I want to work on something with more action in it. Whatever it is, work on improving your personal best. Making it more appealing to you. Make sure that you believe that you are doing the best you can. And then, yes, if everyone is telling you your scripts are too slow, say to yourself, I'm going to try to write one that reads faster or things happen more quickly. Just take into account whatever both you and people who experience your work tell you. You're not always going to do everything everyone says, but you should consider For me, I always had a problem with long first acts. My first acts were 40, 50 pages long. And so for several scripts, all I worked on was I've got to get my first act down to 25 pages. I've got to get the action moving faster. That was hard for me. It took years. So that's the first thing you should be doing. Then you're not wasting time. If you are doing work, you're not wasting time. If you are not working, you are wasting time. But you also may be living your life, and that's cool. That's fine. As far as accomplishing things in your career or your art, career and art being different things, you have no control over the results, the career. Okay, so the thing you have to do is keep working, and then you have to create some form of life that allows you to keep working. So therefore, if you need to, like work in the mornings, see if you can get a job that starts in the afternoon. If you're the sort of person who works late at night, see if you can get a place, maybe get a night watchman job and work at night. I don't know. Everybody is different, but what you have to do is think, what is it that will allow you to do your work on a routine basis, a regular basis? If you can do that, and if you can keep getting work done, then you have to get lucky. And the only way you can get lucky is by completing work and showing it to people. Completing work and showing it to people. The more that you do that, the more that you try to go to festivals or do, if you have to put on a play in your backyard, as I've said, that is legitimately the best way to get lucky. Think about how you can complete work and present it to an audience, ideally fairly regularly, fairly often. So, the equivalent of selling your work at a street fair if you are a painter or a potter or a jewelry maker. If you were a painter or a potter or a jewelry maker, the goal would be A, find a way to make more pots and jewels, and then B, find where you could release them to the... Now, are you then having a factory that releases it all over the world? No. But if you can take it to a little shop here and there, if you can... sell it on the street, if you can go to Etsy and put it on there, that's what you do as an artist. And if you keep doing that, you will ideally slowly build your exposure and your audience, and that will allow you to be lucky. And then also you'll be getting experience so that when you get lucky and some producer sees your work and says, oh, I like that, you will be ready. As someone else asked, how do you get ready for that? By doing it over and over and over. Okay, cool. It's exposing the others to art that isn't happening. Well, that takes work. It takes work. It's a different part of your soul. It's a different part of your personality. Going the ways that you expose your art, learn about that. Take a separate part of your brain, separate part of your day, and say, I'm going to think about how I can expose my art. Everybody's different. If you're doing a web series, put it on the web. If you're doing stuff, see about festivals. Festivals are so valuable to filmmakers. Contests, sometimes, often, just think about ways that you can get your work. Do you think movie theaters will recover? Not really. I believe that they will be like Broadway theaters. There will always be an event venue where people watch theatrically projected movies, and I think that that's great. I think there will always be big ones for the big productions. There will also always be small ones for the little cine lovers who do their little, but those are going to be small. But the business will not be there. The movie is being completely rated right up to the last minute of the editing. That is absolutely true. And there are many cooks, and the writer is sometimes one of them. Very often, the writer is not included. Okay, we're going to head out soon. I am so glad that this is useful. Is it okay to include words depicting emotions experienced by characters? Yes, it is. I discuss that a lot in my behind the script Ways to be Wicked. There's 3 very long sequences where I talk about that exact, there's 3 long sections of live streams where I go through the script scene by scene, and I talk about how I wrote, sometimes showing the internal feelings and sometimes not. So I would advise behind the script, Please take a look at those. There's 3 episodes of it. Oh man. I lots of love to India. Thank you so much, Vendral. That is so kind of you. I feel that's oi. Go to sleep. Get some rest. I'm so glad that you were here. I'm going to take off. I will be back day after tomorrow, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I will do another one of these so we can do more questions. Until then, please go write something. Take care.